I'm just going to go through some of the features in the audio track portion of Audacity. I'm just going to make a little test clip here to give you an example. And you notice as soon as you hit stop, a control panel appears on the left-hand side of your track. The first thing we're going to try out is the close button. You hit the X, it'll close the track you just created, getting rid of it so you don't hear it anymore. If you hit Control Z or undo track remove, it'll come back in case you got rid of a track you didn't want to get rid of. The next item we'll look at is the menu, and the first thing we have is the track name. So this is useful when you have multiple tracks because the default track name is audio track. So if you have 10 audio tracks, you might get confused as to which one you're working with. So you might want to call it my track for a simple project, or track 1, or you could call it voice. If you have something like an instrument, you could have guitar. So we're just going to call this my track. Okay, the second item in the menu is your waveform view form. So right now it's just set to waveform, which is a general view of what you've recorded. Waveform dB is a volume representation of what you've recorded. So what we see here is the relative volume of what we've recorded. This is a really useful one because sometimes you might be recording too loud. At the top you can see we have 0 down to -36. If it's ever higher than 0, that means you're going to get distortion because it's too loud. The other two options are spectrum and pitch. Both of those are kind of for more specialized uses. For the most part, the first two are the most useful. I find waveform dB is most useful, and the default is waveform. So I'm going to put mine to waveform dB. Another option we have in the menu, we can switch from mono, left channel, and right channel. I'll explain a bit more about that later. And there's also other ways to switch that. There's also the quality of audio that you can have, but the default settings are usually more than enough to record any kind of audio. So it gives you the details of what kind of audio right here. So you have a mono track, the sample rate, and etc. And the two other buttons we have are mute and solo. So I'm going to show you how that works by duplicating this track. So I'm just going to click. You can click anywhere right around here to select the entire track. So if you just click there, it'll select the whole thing, and you can go to edit and duplicate. If you want to duplicate exactly what that track is into another track, you can also click Control D. So we have a duplicate track now. I'm going to call this one my track 2, just so I don't get confused. Okay. So now with the mute and solo controls, if you hit mute and then you hit play, it's going to make a little test clip here to give you an example. It's only going to play all the audio tracks that don't have mute on. So if you mute both, it's not going to play anything. This is useful if you're recording several tracks and you just want to hear one track in order to pay attention to the details of that particular track. Another thing you can do is, say if you have several tracks, you can hit solo and it'll make all the other tracks except for that particular track silent. So if I unclick solo, you can see every track that's muted goes gray when you click it. So solo will only play this top track. Okay. The other controls we have in the track window is the volume or gain. And you can see that has a little minus and a plus. Plus is louder, minus is quieter. And you want to be careful with this feature because it doesn't show you in the track how loud it's actually getting. So if I solo this track, give you an example, it'll play it louder. It's going to make a little test clip here. So if I bring it all the way up, we're going to start getting distortion. I'm just going to make a little test clip here to give you an example. You can play around with that a bit, but it's a good way to set, if you want one particular track to be louder than the other, it's a good way to set your overall mix. And the last control we have is our pan. So we have L and R, L meaning left, R meaning right. And what that means is if you put it to the left, it'll only come out if you have a stereo speaker system. It'll only come out the left speaker. If you put it to the right, it'll only come out the right speaker. You probably won't find this a very useful feature, but if you want to play around with some stereophonic trickery, as they call it, this is where you would start. Also, having the left channel and right channel does pretty much the same thing. And the last thing, if you're working with the several tracks, you can click Move Track Down. So now my track has moved down to here. I'll just get rid of that so you can see how that works. And my track 2 is up top. So if I wanted to move my track 2 back down, you can move it back down like that. Another useful trick is to make the track windows smaller. If you're done working with it and you're happy with that track, you make it smaller and make a track that you're working with a bit bigger. It's just another way of working around things so that if you have several tracks, you can see them all in one window. So then I can fit a whole bunch of tracks all in one window. The other one of the other things you might find useful is the zoom tool, which allows you to zoom in and see your wave at a closer distance. If you take selection and just select one word, you'll see exactly how the proportions are. So if I press play here, it only plays one word, so you can see, as opposed to being much further out, where selecting the whole audio track looks much smaller. So that's another useful feature. And that concludes our overview of the track feature in Audacity.